So project 3, we'll get it started here. Going to Access, review what we just did, just for a little brain refresh. And here is my project 3. I have a lot of queries still in there yet. If you didn't finish project 2, in the Populi there is a starting point for project 3 without all the queries. Let's look at what we did last time. Let's bring up my textbook here. We changed the data just a tiny bit. We made the, let's see, what table is that? The veterinary vendors table. Let's see what we did to that. I just look at the data. I see that the product type is a pull down now. Instead of something I type in, we made it into a multi-valued field. And the last thing we also added was the total amount field that shows the quantity times cost. We did a query of that before, but now we can save that information right in the table. And let's just review how we did that. In the design of that total amount, we made it a calculated field. And in the calculation, the wizard helped us, but we can go here to the, here we see the expression. There's the expression. We could have just typed that without having to use the wizard. It's bracket cost times bracket quantity becomes the expression in that field. But we did have to tell it it's a calculated field in order to edit that. Now, there's three little dots here. That shows me the expression builder, a handy way to help you with functions and constants. You're welcome to explore that. But the only thing we worry about here is we made a simple expression. This field is going to be named, or is going to have the calculation cost times quantity. The actual name of that field, we give total amount. And then the result of that is the total amount is displayed and calculated anytime I make changes to the data. That was the last thing we did. Now let's go on to something dangerous. We're going to make changes across the board to our tables. First, we're going to create a query. We're going to do it the very safe way. We're going to go to create. We're going to create a query, and then we will change the type of query it is. So let's take a look at what we're going to do. So first of all, I go to query design, like before, and it is a query on the veterinary vendors table. So it will have that chosen because it had been selected there. If I don't have it chosen, I want to go to tables, veterinary vendors, double click, and all we're going to do is make a change to the product type. So all I put in here is product type is the only column I want to see in the veterinary vendors table. And I'll expand that just so I can see the full title. And before turning it into the dangerous update query, let's just run the query without any criteria. And I see that there's all my product types. I don't care what the particular vendor was, I just see the product type because I'm planning to make a change to all my product types. So go back to design. Now I can change it to an update query. So I click here, and here I'll expand this a little bit. I will see extra fields showing here as soon as I turn it into an update query. So I click update, and now I have update to with criteria. Just imagine I have 200 vendors in there, and they don't have a product type assigned yet. I can change the update to and choose VAC. And what this says is I'm going to change all the product types to the product VAC. But I know they're not all giving me, they're not all vaccinations. So unlike in the book where they made the change to everything regardless of what was there already, I'm going to change the criteria to be is null. What that means is it's blank, and if you don't have a product type filled in, put VAC for vaccination there. So this basically says update anything that has a blank product type. let's just set it to the default of VAC. So in the book they had no criteria, meant they were going to change everything to VAC, but I know that they are not all vaccinations. So I added this. Basically this means if it's blank, then give it VAC. Let's run it and see what happens. It'll warn us, uh-oh, you may make some changes. Even though it sees that I have filled in the product type for all of them, it still pops up the warning, you may be changing something. Are you sure you want to do this? So it gives you a warning about update queries. And in this case, I made it a little safer. I didn't say change them all to VAC, only change the ones that are blank. And I see that, well, I'm not going to make any changes. Let's click yes. The query runs, didn't make any changes, but I can save that now. Yeah.
Is it supposed to like be blank?
Be blank what?
When it pulls up.
When I view the,
Yeah.
yeah, that's supposed to be left blank. This is basically telling you that it didn't have to make any changes because I have filled it in. Now just for fun, let's go to the veterinary vendors table and let's just blank out one of the product types and just see what happens now. So let's just make that last one. Let's blank that one out. And now let's close it. And now let's run the query again by hitting run or view. Oh, it didn't give me a warning. Let's try a run. This time it does say update one row. So we want to do the run, not the view. And it will then make the change. So it's telling me, hey, there will be one row that gets the update because I did remove that product type. And now let's go back to our table and see if the change was made. There I do see the VAC filled in for that product type. Now we could make that criteria much fancier in the query design, changing this criteria to be something other than is null. We could say only update it to VAC if the product name has VAC in it somewhere. Well, we'll just not worry about making a fancy query, but that's what the database programs will do, because this criteria, you want to be super careful. If you leave the criteria blank, you're doing across the board, change everything to VAC. So we'll save this query as AC3-26. So I'm going to save the query now, Control S, and call it AC3-26, and I'll say update VAC where blank is null. Is null is the nerdy way to say it's blank. It's the access language, database language. So there we have made an update query, and if I close it, I will see that the query has a little exclamation point on it, making me realize that could be making a change. If I run it by just double clicking, it will warn me that query may make changes to my table. Are you sure I want to do that? So update queries do give a slightly different icon for that. But imagine how powerful this is, that suppose you're, again, what I mentioned last time is, suppose I'm updating the cost of everything by a certain percentage. All my inventory. I can write an update query that simply multiplies, does an update query, multiplies the cost by a percentage, and makes that the new value. Now there are other queries. If you go to create in the query design, you'll see that there's make, append, and update. Don't worry about knowing how to make all of those queries. The update's the first one that we look at. That's just a very powerful but can be dangerous query. And remember, if you're ever doing anything that may make changes, think to yourself, in case this goes wrong, do I have a backup? That's a common thing you would need to keep in mind. Next thing I cover in the database concepts here is validating the data. We want to have pure data because that is the foundation of our database. So we want to make sure that they don't accidentally enter the wrong data. If we see let's look at the veterinarians. Thinking about that previous database we did, remember how the state could only have 2 characters? That was one way of sort of validating the design. If I go to design, let's see, does the state, right now, let's see, does the state limited to 2 characters? In this case, the state field size is has no limit on it. So it's not as concise as one of our first databases. Let's adjust. They would like us to fix some field sizes in here and make sure I'm doing the right table. In the veterinary vendors table, they would like to make sure that they do actually have a vendor name listed. Oh, in the veterinary vendors table. Right-click Design, veterinary vendors table. We want to make sure that they don't leave the name blank. How do I do that? Down here, I can choose Required in the properties. So in the design view, vendor name selected, double-click that, toggle Required to Yes. That means if they try to enter a new vendor and leave the name blank, it'll say, sorry, I can't update their record. A required field is missing. I can also change another field, the quantity field. We can make that not necessarily required, but if they do enter a number, make sure that they don't enter a negative number, and that would be in the validation rule. And here's what that would look like. We want it to be a number greater than 0, so I do greater than 0. Because what sense would it be to have someone that supplies quantity 0 to you? We also don't want to have an unreasonably large number, so I add the word and put less than or equal to 1,000. So now they can't accidentally enter an invalid number, can't enter a negative quantity, that wouldn't make any sense. And just to be polite, we're going to enter a validation text. If they do enter something incorrectly, we will say something like, please enter a positive number less than 1,000. Less than or equal to, maybe I'll say up to 1,000. Up to 1,000. Now I could say greater than 0 and up to 1,000, but I'm trying to be concise as possible because this will be a message that pops up when they type an invalid number. Unlike many of Microsoft's errors or messages, let's try to make it sound friendly. The word please makes it sound a little more friendly. Where without that message, it would say the required element has violated validation rules. Please correct that. And you look at that and wonder, what do they mean? Here we have a friendly message. Now let's see how it works. I go to Datasheet View, saving the change I just made to that validation rule and to the required test. And let's test that this works. Because I have added a validation rule, it will warn you I have to check all the rules for all the data that you already have. It's a short table, so we don't worry about that. And now, just for fun, let's try entering a new vendor without a name. And we'll make it an address, 2570 Asbury Road. Now, it doesn't complain while we're on that field, but if we try to leave that row, there's my message. You must enter a value in the veterinary vendors field, because that was a required field. So that's what you'll see because it's a required field. I click OK. It doesn't let me leave that row. Now let's add the vendor name, Emmaus Supplies. And now let's leave that. And now we get our other message. Hey, wait a minute. You need a positive number up to 1,000 in our quantity. The default value for quantity was 0, and it doesn't like 0 there. So let's try entering a -1. It complains as soon as I try to leave that row. Sorry, it has to be a positive number. And now let's enter a correct number of 10. And now when I leave that field with a tab or leave the record, it doesn't care that I've left everything else blank because I didn't make those required. So this is something that databases have to be sure that if we have good data, we better add some validation rules so someone can't accidentally miss some important information that if it's not there, my software just blows up because it's expecting a zip code and doesn't know where to ship it to because there's no zip code. There's no cost. It would make sense to make costs be required and maybe make it other than a default of 0. So let's go back to the design of that table and see if they have anything else to specify. In the product type, they would like the default value of product type to be set to VAC. Well, here is the default value in the click on product type. Down in the properties of product type, we can set the default value to be VAC. Now if I leave that, I think it puts an equal quote in front of it. Oh, it doesn't put the equal in front of it. In the textbook, they throw a equal, but I think we're fine with just having quotes around VAC. Now they do more on this field because we know that we only want this to be VAC or MC or SUP. Let's add the validation rule there to be VAC or MC or SUP. And I'm missing a quote. So let's see if it puts the quotes around for me if I leave that. Yep, it puts the quotes around there for me. So I could have typed the quotes. It puts them there for me. And let's again make the validation text be friendly. Please enter one of VAC, MC, or SUP. Now in the lookup, I could have in the wizard said limit to list. That would have done it for me too. But we made it a little more complex just so we would have to do the work here. We made the rule. It has to be one of these. If that doesn't come out to be true, it'll pop up the message, please enter one of those. Now let's check to see if it actually does what we expect. Go to View, saving the change I just made. Data integrity rules because I've added the validation rule. Uh-oh, it says something validates the validation rule, product type. Is this where the equal sign is missing? In the book they had the equal in front of that. It did let me go over there. Let's see. Oh, there was one that was blank. So it's complaining about this one that's missing the value. So now let's choose VAC, tab, or clicking off of that. Now it's happy. If I try to delete it and leave it blank, it should complain. Oh, it didn't complain. Huh. Let's try to set it to something other than one of those. Let's set it to ABC. It should complain now. Yep. It won't allow an entered value. So let's change that back to, say, VAC. Notice it's not complaining about these others because I haven't set default or required on these others. So if I were doing this completely, I would probably put required on a lot of these other fields so they wouldn't leave them blank. I would probably at least require either an email or a full address so I could have a valid contact. But that's something left, we'll leave that to the database experts. We just know that there are ways to make sure we don't leave important columns blank. Those are the validation rules. See if we have any other validation rules. I think that's it. They go through a few example tests about that in the textbook as well. And now just a few more things we're going to do. Back to our veterinary vendors. I'm going to go back to datasheet view and delete that blank, that test one, number 7. That was just a test. I'm going to go ahead and delete that because that's not a real vendor. And I can click in the gray and then hit delete. And it warns me about, hey, that's not something you can undo. Now, they go back to something simple. They just want to change the street address for a particular field in the vendor number 2. Vendor number 2, Gaines Vet Supplies. It is 320 West Haven Boulevard, and we need room to type the word Boulevard in there. We stretch that column out and type in space Boulevard. Funny spelled word. I lived on Sioux Boulevard all my life. Got used to that name, abbreviated BLVD. In the book, they mention that there may be a limit on field sizes. Oh, they just adjust the column. Now, we've been doing that all along, so that's no big deal. We've already shown how we can use a lookup value, so they demonstrate that. Multi-valued lookup, we see how we did all that. And now we want to change the appearance just slightly. Heading to page AC3-37. In the veterinary vendors table, they would like us to just do a little bit of adjustment. In the veterinary vendors table, I can turn on totals right here. Toggle on totals. When I click on totals, it pops up an extra little row here at the bottom of all the contents of my table, just by toggling totals. And it gives us a chance to have it calculate right here the sum of all the items in that particular column. Now, it will let me do the sum of all these items too, but it doesn't make any sense. This is a very useful item. This tells me basically the total amount possible if all my inventory were fresh, by changing or adding that extra little piece of information. So turning on or off totals lets me display possibly useful information about my entire table. So just by toggling that lets me add that extra information in the format of my veterinary vendors table. And it remembers that if I close this table, saving the changes, whenever I come back to that table, it'll remember that I want to see totals whenever I view that table. Now, other tables I may not care to see totals, so I could leave it off. If I ever was useful to have a total calculated for me, I could toggle that on and give a sum of all the total costs of all my treatments, if that were useful to someone. So toggling that on or off lets me add just a little bit of useful information about that particular table. Some of the other ones doesn't make any sense, like there's nothing to total up here, so totals wouldn't be useful here, but I can turn it on and see what could I do. Here, let's try. I could just do a count. If it's text, all I can do is count how many are not blank. But that's not terribly useful, so I don't need totals to be on for that table. So something I can toggle in the settings of any table in case that's a useful number. And I'm saving the changes just for fun. They go through a little bit of formatting of whether or not you want to see the grid lines. I think that's fairly trivial. But in any table, if I have it open, let's go back to our vendors table, I can turn on or off the grid lines and the colors. Let's say no grid lines in case the lines bother you. I think the grid lines are handy, so I leave them on myself. But you can toggle lines on and off just in the formatting. If it's helpful, you can turn off whether or not you're using alternating colors. I think it's a good thing, so I'm going to leave the colors on. But if you ever want to change your alternating colors, you could choose that from your table. In case it just your manager would be impressed by how you can change the colors in the display of your table. But we got to get to something even more important than colors and things. Very important concept. It begins with a story. A story of a pet that was delivered to this veterinarian vendors, or to this veterinary clinic. They brought in a little pet, and let's find out our pet's name. Let's choose Little Fluffy here. Little Fluffy was brought in, and let's see, Fluffy. Let's do Elvis. We got Elvis. Elvis was brought in, a little Siamese cat, cute little Siamese cat. But then somebody had a call from owner 3, and someone decided to rename owner 3 to owner 33, just because they thought that was a better number to go with Liz. Liz, that was her favorite number. Okay, Liz got her number changed to 033, and now when they go to look at the patients, they look for Elvis. They want to send Elvis home, and there is no owner 0-3 anymore. And poor little Elvis is now an orphan, has no owner. Sad little Elvis. Would you want that to happen to your poor little pet Elvis? We need to keep that from happening. What happened here is 0-3 is no longer a valid owner because somebody accidentally, or on the request, some other reason or software, changed the owner's ID of Liz to 0-33. Without watching that would mess up some patients that had 0-3 as their owner. What happened here is we violated referential integrity, meaning the patient is referencing their owner, and the owner has been changed. The patient did not get updated to the new ID of the owner, because that is how we reference the owner, by that primary key field. So we can fix the no longer have Elvis be an orphan by correcting 0-3 to be 0-33 back to 0-3, because that's who the owner of Elvis is. Now, how could we keep this from happening? Because this is a very important thing. We don't want orphan data in our database. So here's what we do. I can go to Database Tools, Relationships. Database Tools, Relationships. And I double-click the Patients table and double-click the Owners table and add them into my relationships established in this database. And I drag, one direction or another, drag owner ID from one table to owner ID in the other table. And I check enforce referential integrity. So if anyone tries to change the ID of an owner, we would like to make sure that the update does get passed on to all the other tables that are referencing that particular owner. So I create the relationship, enforcing referential integrity. Now, after creating that, it'll check to make sure you're not violating any rules already, and I can close my relationships, saving the changes. And now let's go back to owners and see what happens if we change Liz's ID to 0-33. Hey, it doesn't complain. Let's go back to patients and see, has Elvis been made a orphan? Oh no, look. The owner Elvis is referring to gets the updated change. So we don't orphan Elvis by changing the ID of their owner. That is what referential integrity is about. And let's just do one thing here just for fun. Back in relationships, double click on that line. Let's turn off Cascade Update and click OK. And close, saving the changes. Let's now try to change the owner ID again, back to 3. It'll say, sorry, since you didn't cascade the update, it won't let you change it because that would break referential integrity. Now, it doesn't give you a terribly helpful message, but basically what this is saying is you have to go manually change the owner, but we'd rather let it automatically happen. So clicking OK, Control Z, undo that change because it won't allow, and go back to relationships, double click the line, and have it, hey, if I ever change the owner ID, make sure to cascade and update any reference to that. There's a third box that if I actually delete the owner, I will also remove the references to any of their patients, any of their pets from my database as well. I'm choosing to not have that happen because I want to make sure that, hey, we don't delete owners until we have properly removed their pets first. I could have the database automatically do that for me if I chose that box. So let's do again what the book wants another specific referential integrity. Jumping ahead now to relationships, owners. Let's see if they do the same one. I forget if they do the same one. Yeah, they do the same one. Yeah, okay. I forgot that if they have done a different one. Now, just for fun, do we see any other references that we don't want to lose the relationship with? How about patients, or how about appointments? Let's look at appointments. In the appointments table, we have appointments are related to a patient and an owner, right? We have a patient ID. Well, we better make sure that we don't have the wrong patient listed when we're referring to a patient. Let's drag patient ID to patient ID. So when we have an appointment and we're referring to a patient, it better be an existing patient, or our appointments table is going to be all messed up. And in case we do update a patient's ID, let's make sure that that update gets transferred to any related records. Okay, so now I have that relationship, and it's going to check to make sure there are no rules currently broken to try to establish that relationship. And I get past that, so I know we don't have any bad appointments. And now I create, wait a minute, I do have a bad, I'm referring to a non-existent patient somewhere in my relationships. I know I have a problem. I'm going to uncheck enforce, and without the referential integrity, it will allow me to establish that relationship. But now I have to go manually check on what appointment is referring to a non-existent patient. Just for fun here, let's take a look. I'm referring to F1C2. Oh, that's right. Look at that. Our appointments table, we renamed our patients all beginning with P. So we see that our appointments table right now is invalid. Look at, I'm referring to non-existent patients. So I discovered bad data in my database by trying to establish that referential integrity. So since I can't do that, I'm going to delete that attempted relationship and maybe make a note to my database people, hey, we've got bad data. Let's try establishing the relationship to the owner. Remember, the owner is the owner ID. Let's see if there's a problem there. I can drag owner to owner ID there. And let's try enforcing referential integrity there, meaning make sure that it's an existing owner. If you change the owner, update it here too. Let's see if it will let me create that relationship. I won't know if it works until I try to close the relationships. Saving changes. Oh, it doesn't complain. Now if I go to the appointments table, I will see that all my owners are valid owners. Let's just for fun try to change it to an owner I know doesn't exist. And it should say, there is no owner of that name. I'm not going to let you do that. That's a very important thing in databases when there's these relationships between them. Yes?
It's not letting me create the relationship between the owner and the owner ID. Did you click both the boxes that you enforced?
I did do the enforce and update. Now, if it doesn't let you do that, that's telling you that you are referring, likely in the appointments table, referring to a non-existent owner. And if it's not a big deal, if you can't establish the relationship, what you can do is here, don't check enforce referential integrity, but just leave the line there and go back and check your owners to see, do you have those various owners, and correct any's. I'm going to change that one back to a O-3 as original. Check your appointments to see what owners you're referring to. So by doing this, you're also finding out and checking the integrity of your tables, which is a huge deal with databases, because if the data isn't properly configured, like I'm referring to non-existent owners, that means I've got bad data. So establishing that referential integrity helps keep your data clean and correctly related. The main thing is, in your relationships, the main thing they do in the book is their owner ID relationship to owner ID in the owners table. But to check my database integrity, I can turn on multiple. Let's see if they're if I'm referring to a veterinarian. Well, if I want to establish, make sure I'm referring to an existing veterinarian, I can add veterinarians to my relationships and choose veterinarian ID related to that veterinarian. Again, saying if I'm establishing an appointment, I better be referring to a current, a valid veterinarian. And if it can't establish a relationship, then I know there's a problem. And now I can close the relationships and save changes. And if I ever try now to refer to a non-existent veterinarian in an appointment, like here, it will say, sorry, that violates the rule. Now the error message isn't very helpful, but it gives you a clue that there is a problem with a veterinarian's reference to a veterinarian. And to fix it, I have to go back, Control-Z, undo the change to the non-existent veterinarian. So referential integrity, very important concept in databases, because those tables that are related to each other, without these relationships, someone could mess up the data, and we have orphan pets, non-existent veterinarians, we're sending out bills and not getting bills back. And that's something that does happen in databases. They haven't designed it right to check for errors, and they found out later that, hey, someone's been overcharged. Could be because the database was messed up. Now, because of these relationships, if I look at my owners table, I now see a little plus next to the records. If I click the plus, oh, that's not it. Let's see. I want to. What did they do? They click the plus, and they can decide to see a sub data sheet. Let's just see a sub data sheet of the patients. There is the patients related to that particular owner. Now, whenever I click on an owner, I can see who their pets are. That's called the sub data sheet feature. The first time I clicked it, I told it show me the patients, and now it will show me what patients belong to that owner. And here we see that Cyrus has currently no patients listed in our patients table. That's called the sub data sheet. And that just came about because on the plus I chose it at the first time, show me the patients related to this owner. And again, that's another result of having those relationships established. And that's about as fancy as we get in Access databases. Just some basic concepts. There's way more that can be done. If you find this kind of interesting, again, you can do well in a career just learning to use Access. You can see it's not a simple program, but it's very powerful. Storing information that can be updated with just a one update query. If you change the address of an owner, you only change it in one place because we have separated out the owner information from patient information. There's only one place where we have the address of Ted, which is a wonderful thing in databases. We don't like redundancy in databases because if I have to change it in multiple places, I'm likely to have an error in one of them or a mismatch, and we don't know what the real address is. In this case, owner has one place where they keep the address. And of course, making sure we back up our databases. As databases get large, underneath the database tools, there are tools like compact and repair. If we've done a lot of things, this is something that's the database programmer will need to do, or will be part of the maintenance, is we simply say, make sure that the data is well organized, and we'll leave it to Access to figure out what compact and repair means. In case your database is getting huge, compact and repair will sometimes fix things. Lots of possibilities here, but remember, there's where relationships are. Now next week, we'll be practicing just a little bit more with databases. We're going to use a a Bible database that's been built for you. You're going to be modifying it and learning how building queries on a database given to you just gives you a little practice. But this is Project 3 is now complete, ready to submit, and now you're database experts. And you'll be even better experts next week using the most valuable database of all, the Bible database. So save that, upload to Populi, and you are done for the day. You have a wonderful weekend. Come to all the concerts. Sadly, the UD concert is not free this year. It's $29.